Hey guys, how's it going? I'm Thomas Brush, and I make indie games for a living. It's kind of hilarious watching AAA studios do such a great job making games, but do such a terrible job all at the same time. It's like a paradox. On one end of the spectrum, Cyberpunk 2077, guys, it's a marvel. On the other end, it's a mess. That's why I like short and sweet 2D games. You know what you're gonna get, and you know the bugs are likely ironed out because, hey, the game is pretty simple, and it doesn't need to look more realistic than real life. That's why I decided I would spend 40 hours over the holidays not only wrangling my kids, but also making Cyberpunk into a classic 2D shooter. Let me tell you how I did it, and be sure to stick around to the end of this video to see me play the full game. And let me know in the comments if I accomplished my goal of making Cyberpunk 2077 a 2D game. Also, be sure to smackety smack that like button for the YouTube algorithm, and don't forget about the subscribe button. That would really mean a lot to me, guys. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So I started this project by using a tool I created inside of Unity, and I call this tool the Super Simple 2D Game Kit. It's an amazing name, I know. And by the way, you can download it completely free if you want, link in the description. It's basically just all the platforming mechanics you need in a 2D game, and I actually used this when I made PewDiePie's game in 14 days. All right, I started with this little code base, and I figured I'd have a shooter ready to go in a couple of hours. How hard could it be, right? Actually, pretty hard. The problem with 2D shooters versus 3D first-person shooters is, well, you kind of got to show the whole player's body. His limbs are attached to the gun, and they have to bend and move based on the cursor's location. So after days of scrubbing through Google, I was able to slap together a not-so-terrible 2D shooting mechanic. I used ray casting for the bullets, and then instantiated a bunch of particles and stuff at the point the ray cast hit to make it seem like a super fast bullet. The alternative is to shoot actual bullet prefabs really fast through the scene. Unlike real life, if you shoot a bullet too fast in a video game, it can actually go through a wall and nothing happens. Side note, have you ever wondered what the frame rate of our real life is? Like if I shot a bullet super fast in real life, couldn't it pass through a wall if there was a frame rate? But bullets don't pass through walls, do they? They blow through walls. So there's really no frame rate in our life. So our update loop is basically infinitely divisible. There's no real way to measure actual physical movement without pretending time exists. Therefore, time doesn't exist?
Don't try to understand it. Feel it.
I then added a particle emitter to the gun to make it look like bullet shells are flying out of the gun. And I stole the shoot sound from the game for the Militech MK31 HMG, and everything in the game really came to life. Okay, so at this point my adrenaline is starting to pump, and I couldn't help but want to add some epic cyberpunk music. I jumped over to Epidemic Sound and snagged a pretty cool song called Night Stalker by Wave Saver. Honestly, cheesy music like this is what I would have preferred in Cyberpunk 2077, but instead we got a bunch of, honestly, atmospheric drone sounds that I'm not a huge fan of. Now, my absolute favorite part of creating this game was the art. Whether it's my Nintendo Switch game, Neversong, or my very first Steam game, Pinstripe, I always start my games with a tiny color palette, a really small color palette, and I stick to it no matter what through the creation of my level art. Now, in my case, I did what any brilliant artist does. I stole colors from a Cyberpunk poster I really liked on Google. I also focused heavily on maintaining a desaturated, silhouetted, monochromatic look with pops of neon signage pulled directly from the game. I then broke some more copyright laws, downloaded random textures from Google, and I slapped them onto various designs I copied from the game, like the apartment doors, the buildings and the sewage, and the restaurants. Now, I'll be honest guys, at this point I was about to give up on this whole thing. The game looked pretty blech, and honestly not at all like Cyberpunk 2077. At the end of this video, After some meditative screen staring, I realized you can't really make a Cyberpunk game without actual lighting, like real lighting. So I did some research on Bracky's YouTube channel, and I discovered that Unity has a pretty sweet set of beta lighting tools for 2D. In all the games I've released on console and Steam, I have never once used this tool.
You what?
And honestly, I wish I would have, because it's awesome. A little trick I learned in life is that if you feel drab and depressed, sometimes all you need is a tiny pop of something sugary and awesome.
Give me sugar.
And that drab in your life actually kind of feels like it fits in, like it's almost necessary. It's kind of yin and yang. The same is true with games. If your entire game is dark and gray, it looks cheap and lazy and boring. But you throw in just a few lights, just maybe 2 lights, and all of a sudden your scene looks magical. Contrast is your friends, guys. The lights made things look very cyberpunky, as did some graffiti and neon pulled directly from the game. Oh, and hey, let's throw in some rain, some fog, and some post-processing glow effects. And now we have a Cyberpunk 2077 2D remake, and I like it. Okay, so now all that's left is, well, making this boring pink character look awesome. I first designed his gun. I took a screen grab of the Militech MK31 HMG, and I simplified it and I recolored it to fit in with my 2D world. Taking a 3D gun and making it pretty in 2D isn't too difficult, but taking a 3-dimensional Keanu Reeves and bringing him into a small 2D space is a tad more challenging. And yes, in our little 2D cyberpunk world, Keanu is absolutely 100% the main character. I couldn't turn this down.
Set it on fire.
All right, so the funny thing about making 2D games, and I've been doing this for about a decade, is the simple fact that your character may look stunning in Photoshop, but the moment you rig him up inside of Unity and you start playing your game, he ends up looking like Smeagol. And the weirdest part about this is, you can't actually put a finger on why exactly the rig looks so bizarre. All you can do is tweak and tweak and tweak and tweak. I eventually got him tweaked and he looked pretty awesome, and my favorite part was adding a simple series of trail effects to make it look like he had long hair blowing in the wind. That took like 5 minutes and it added so much life to the character, and I was really proud of that one.
Okay.
So I was about a week into creating this game, and I needed to get it done because, honestly, like you guys,
Loser! You're a loser!
I got sick of my game. However, I knew I needed to add enemies to the game. Humanoid bipedal enemies are the absolute hardest thing to create in a 2D game, in my opinion. Not necessarily because of the movement, but because getting the animation to look fluid and realistic and just decent, guys, it's a real challenge. So I set out on a mission to justify my laziness about bipedal creatures, about humanoid characters, by scouring the internet looking for bots and droids that could be the enemies in the game. I found a grounded enemy type in Cyberpunk 2077, and it's called the Militech Spider Bot. I also knew I needed a flying enemy type, and we'll talk about that when I actually play the game. After hours of searching, I couldn't find any flying enemy types, so I just threw together a random design that kinda sucks balls. To make up for my laziness, I did spend a good chunk of time redesigning the scene of Jackie eating Asian food.
Who?
Jackie.
Am I remembering right, or just had a brain fart?
Now here's a quick trick. If you suck at drawing humanoids, Google whatever stance you're looking for and just draw over it. After I got a general silhouetted idea of what a bulky dude looks like sitting at a table, I just drew Jackie over top of the silhouette, animated him, and pulled his audio from the game. Thanks to my rudimentary dialogue system in the Super Simple 2D Game Kit, again, link in the description, download it for free, I now have story elements in the game. I also threw in a few world building elements like the TVs in the elevators near your apartment. And voila! After a little over a week of full-time work, I have, in my humble opinion, a pretty awesome looking Cyberpunk 2077 2D game that you can actually play, link in the description. So let's go ahead and play it. All right, so as you can see, we're playing as Keanu Reeves, and we're outside of our apartment here. The gun here, the apartment doors, the style of the sewage lines, the graffiti, the advertisements, these are all pulled from the game and redesigned in 2D. The most difficult part of making a 2D game, in my opinion, is getting the movement right, getting the player animation right. It really helps to have trail effects, and actually his hair is a trail effect. You've got smoke coming out of his body as he jumps. Games like Hollow Knight actually do that really well. So it just helps to make it feel more alive, make it feel like you're actually moving a character. 2D is really tough in that regard. A first-person shooter, you don't actually have to show the player, but in 2D, you have to show it and you have to make sure it looks good. All right, let's go ahead and listen to these TVs. These TVs were pulled from the actual game.
Karina, what is relic exactly? In a word, if you could.
In one word, I'd say immortality. That's right. Relic allows you to transfer the consciousness from a dying person, finding a new home for their soul on a transferable chip.
All right. Well, thank you for letting me know. So as you can see, building a world, building a story is actually very inexpensive in a 2D game. All you got to do is have some dialogue, have some audio, and allow the player to interact with that. All right, let's collect some Euro dollars here. And again, we've got graffiti and neon pulled directly from the game, and it makes the game just feel obviously like a Cyberpunk game. I've taken advantage of what Unity has to offer in terms of 2D lighting. It's still in beta, but we've really got a great system here of 2D lights. There's just a ton of 2D lights here. And honestly, I don't know how I could make a Cyberpunk game without 2D lighting. Even lighting coming out of the player. You see this in games like Hollow Knight as well. It makes it feel a lot more moody and a lot more alive. So right now I'm fighting a airborne drone enemy. And the reason I decided to do drone enemies is because we have all this empty space up here in a 2D game. And so flying enemies, especially in a shooter with a 2D game, flying enemies, honestly, they're kind of required. Because otherwise we're just going to be shooting this way and shooting that way. All right, let's go ahead and move past the no-tell motel here. And check out these grounded enemies as well. So these were pulled from the game. I don't know if they're actually enemies. I never really encountered them as enemies, but they are a type of character. So I pulled those from the game, and let's just take care of this little drone onslaught here. And as you can see, I've taken advantage of Unity's particle system. I've got a ton of particle emitters. Ouchie. So when in doubt, when you've got a small budget for your 2D game, particle systems will serve you well. Look at this chaos that I just created. And these particles are permanent, so they're gonna hang out on the ground so that I can feel like I'm actually interfering and changing the world and being creative as I play this game. All right, let's go see if we can find Jackie. So I've taken the model of Jackie from the 3D game and I've made it into 2D. And I've also taken his audio lines. So let's see what his mission is for us.
I think I might have bagged this a sweet-ass J.O.B. I mean, maybe it's not as big as that, but just that he's fronted by a little-known someone named Dexter Deschamps. 300 pounds of partly gold-plated cool.
All right, let's go ahead and take Jackie's mission. All right, so as you can see, we could turn this game into a Metroidvania. That's probably what I would do if I was to flesh it out. So we would take this mission, maybe he would give us a key or a key code, and we could go back to the beginning of the level and go to the doors. Maybe there's a locked door. Enter that door, do a mission, maybe get an upgraded gun, or upgrade our character, or maybe a double jump ability or something like that. So it would really be a lot like a Hollow Knight type game. But that is the prototype that I created in a week, guys. Hopefully you can see this game could really be massive. Sky's the limit with these kinds of 2D games. Feel free to play the game in the description. I laugh because there's so many glitches, so many bugs, and it's a short demo. But hopefully you can study it and see how you can make a three-dimensional game like Cyberpunk 2077, something that's honestly just a beautiful game, and turn it into something simple like this 2D game here.
Change?
I don't want that in my scene.
Big change.